Guys, it's me, Miss Norris, and today I'd like to share a fun read aloud of the story Moosetache. Moosetache was written by Margie Palatini and illustrated by Henry Cole in 1997, and it's a really funny story, and I hope you really enjoy it. If you're ready to get started, I'm ready to share. Here we go. Moosetache. Look at all that hair and scissors and combs and brushes. Moose had a problem. A horrible, hairy, prickly problem. It grew right below his nostrils and just above his upper lip. A moosetache. So it's not just a mustache, it's a mustache on a moose. It's a moosetache, and it's pretty impressive. But itchy is what it sounds like. Now, not a few spare hairs or a shy little stubble. No mere weak wandering whiskers on the upper lip of this moose. No siree. Moose had a big, bushy, bristly, mighty moosetache. But a moosetache that was a burly, surly, mangy mess. And it itched. A lot. Sure, he plucked and he tweezed. He even clipped and snipped and teased. But his combs were still cowards, and his brushes rebelled, and his scissors simply surrendered. So you can see his comb was a scaredy cat. His brush said, "No way, we're not doing it." And his scissors gave up. They surrendered. Poor moose. What do you think he's going to do? What would you do if you had a giant moosetache? Moose was in a frizzy tizzy. The moosetache was completely crimping his style. He was a great hoofer. That means dancer. But he could barely bop and hip-hop with a moosetache going flip-flop. So he's trying to get out there and listen to his headphones and dance, but his moosetache is getting in the way. He was a wonderful chef, but he simply could not flambe his souffle with all of those whiskers in his way. So a souffle is a type of food, and flambe means when you set it on fire, just so that it gets a little bit crunchy and crackly on the outside. But could you imagine making a big fire with your face full of hair? Oh, Moose says no. And he was a daring skier. But how could he downhill race with the mighty moosetache blowing in his face? Moose had to do something. And soon. But what? So the wind is blowing as he's going fast down the hill, and it's making all of his moosetache get in his eyes. After days and days of much serious thought, Moose got an idea. He crossed some hair here, he crossed some hair there, and he tied his moosetache around his neck. A moose scarf seemed to be the ideal answer to his problem. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect. So he wrapped it around like a moose scarf. You think this is going to work? But then his moosetache got knotted and mangled and horribly tangled, and those hundreds of hairs still prickled and tickled. Worse, Moose could barely take a breath with all that moosetache wrapped around his neck. So it was kind of choking him a little bit. So Moose untied, unwrapped, unknotted, and gulped in some fresh air. It looks like it was hot, too. It would be hot to have a bunch of hair wrapped around your body. He got another idea. He parted some hair this way, he parted some hair that way, and he heaped all that mustache on top of his head. Moustachioed antlers seemed to be the ideal answer to his problem. It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect. Until... dun dun dun! A squadron of squirrels and one very nosy gopher moved right in to the Moose Motel. They huddled and hoarded, burrowed in, burrowed out. Needless to say, it became quite crowded up there on Moose's head, and heavy and messy. Do you imagine a bunch of squirrels living in your hair? So he tried to put it all up on his antlers, but then a family of squirrels and a nosy gopher moved in. And very, very noisy. The squirrely chitting and chatting, squeals and squawks woke Moose every morning before the crack of dawn. And that gopher was giving the moose one hairy headache. Moose needed his sleep. He needed his rest. He needed his privacy. Moustachioed antlers? Nuts, said Moose. So he unparted, unpiled, untwisted, untwined, and said adios to hairy horns. Did you see how the squirrels, when Moose takes a shower, they all put up their umbrellas and the gopher has a scuba diving mask on? That's why Moose needed his privacy. But now what? What? The miserable Moose took a hold of a hunk of hair and he wrestled it. Then he roped it. He tethered, tied, tamed. Aha! A moose tail. Now that was so simple. That was so easy. That was not so perfectly perfect. Talk about a dizzy do. Moose didn't know if he was coming or going, backward, forward, this way, that way. He didn't know which end was which. Moose had to bail on the tail. So you can see he made a tail, like a ponytail, but on the front, and then it just confused him. He didn't know which way was which. And so he thought, and thought, and thought some more, but no other idea was a worthy winner. Braids were a bother. A moustache sweater? Too sweltering. Net? Not. Poor Moose. His problem was truly terrible. Unbearable. Just downright sad. He felt so alone. He didn't know what else to do. What would you do? It seems like none of these ideas are seeming to work, but I'm kind of proud of Moose. He has a lot of really good ideas. I don't know if I would have that many ideas. Then, call it fate, call it destiny. It was probably just dumb luck. But one day, Moose tripped on his moustache and just had no time to duck. Oomph! Oh, pardon me, they both said as they bumped. Then they blinked. Then they stared. And their hearts went thump-a-thump, thump-a-thump. She was a moose with a bouffant so bodacious, outrageous. Well, it was just plain old big. Hair after hair piled higher than high, a skyscraping dew of glorious curls, a tower of swirling twists and twirls. She was simply splendid, stupendous, absolutely superb. So you see, he tripped on his mustache and he bumped into another moose, a lady moose, and he admired her hair that was very big and very high. A bouffant. That's a fun word to say. Try that. Bouffant. A bouffant just means a big poofy hair. Of course, Moose had to ask how she did what she did to get such a do. Miss Moose winked and then whispered, "Just a little glue." So she helped he fearlessly plunge a hoof into a fat pot of the white gooey goop, and carefully, oh so carefully, they glopped and they plopped, they pasted and they pressed, they coaxed and curled every truly unruly wayward whisker. Around and around they tweaked and twirled those horrible hairs until Moose's once mangy mess was now a wondrous winding wave of marvelous Moosetache. Moose gazed in the mirror and smiled a broad, moosey smile. He was so happy, so glad, just giddy with glee. He looked dashing and handsome. Moose gushed, "Huh, is that really me?" So you can see they're using some glue, probably like hair gel, but glue, to tame his mane. And you can see a good look of Miss Moose's bouffant. It's kind of something else, isn't it? With not a care for one hair, the moose pair boogied and bopped. They skied downhill and even uphill. And their cooking was hot, hot, hot. So all of the things Moose wanted to do before, dance, ski, cook, he could do that all now because his mustache was tamed and he had someone to do it with. So, of course, it wasn't long after that Moose and his mustache and his beautiful bride foxtrotted and tangoed and waltzed down the aisle. Good hair days, bad hair days, they vowed to love and cherish. And with hearts heaped with love and pots filled with goop, they both sighed, "Ah, I do," glue, and promised never to part. So I guess Moose is kind of lucky he had that mustache, because otherwise he might never have tripped and met Miss Moose, who's now Mrs. Moose. Aren't they pretty fancy on their wedding day? It was so simple, so easy, so perfectly perfect. And it stuck. The end. So you can see they have a picture. It says Niagara Falls, which is probably what they went on a honeymoon. And now they have a little baby moose. And look how happy they all are. And I think little Moose might need to learn how to get glued too. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you really enjoyed the story Moosetache. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button at the bottom of the page. If you are already a subscriber, thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot to me. If you're not a subscriber yet, click the subscribe button down here at the bottom of the page. And don't forget to click the bell so that you're notified when there's new content. I hope to see you all real soon. Bye-bye.